There was a young woman who was invited to go camping and rock climbing with her friends. And she had never done any rock climbing before, but she was assured that she would be all right by participating in this activity. And so even with her being scared to death to rock climb, she went. She put on all the gear and started up the massive granite face. She then climbed to a ledge and then took a breather. As she was hanging on there with the safety rope, it snapped against her clothing and it popped a contact lens out when it grazed her face. She looked and looked with her one good eye suspended hundreds of feet in the air, hoping that the lens had landed on her clothing somewhere or maybe was on the ledge itself, but it just wasn't there. When she got to the top, her friend examined her eye and her clothing again to see if the lens perhaps was still around, but it was nowhere to be found. As she looked across the mountains, covering her lensless eyes, she prayed, "Lord, you can see these mountains in all their clarity. You know exactly where every stone and leaf is. And you know exactly where my contact lens is." Well, after a while, the group left that high vista and they walked down the trail to the bottom. At the bottom, there was another party that was getting ready to now go up that granite rock face. And one of them shouted out as they saw them come down on the trail, "Hey, is anybody in your group, did they lose a contact lens?" Well, that would have been startling enough. But the fella had noticed it because he had noticed an ant that was moving slowly across the face of a rock, carrying a contact lens. Now, when I tell this true story, it always reminds me that the greatest gifts are found where and when we least expect them. In our first reading from the Acts of the Apostles, and then the reading from the Gospel today, from John's Gospel, you can see that they are actually similar in how the energy of both of those readings affect us. There is a tension in both of these readings, and it's a tension of serendipity and unpredictability. There is apprehension in these readings, and there is awe in these readings. There is some skepticism, and there is surprise, and they are all colliding with each other. We get a picture today from these two readings, primarily that transformation is more like an open-ended adventure than a predictable pattern for life. The Holy Spirit is represented as an ongoing part of who we can become, not just a one-time event. It's more like a series of ahas. Jesus has been guiding us for several weeks now in John's Gospel that if we want to experience life in its complete joy, that it's not a matter of you getting or capturing or holding on to more of the Holy Spirit. It's a matter of being open for the Holy Spirit to have more of you. We're learning through Richard Rohr's his quote about faith, that in faith, and when we take steps of faith, we recognize that faith itself will be a new and an unfamiliar place for us. And when we are open to the Spirit of the Holy in our lives, many times this advocate of Christ is going to be newly recognized as an aha, a sudden realization, an inspiration, an insight, a recognition, a comprehension, a response that occurs in a different way than we normally would experience something. That's the nature of an aha And these ahas many times become then major turning points for us. If you can reflect back on those ahas that have happened in your life, many times they are turning points that inform you, they transform you. You make lasting, lifelong imprints in you about the impact. And the Spirit's aha does that in us and through us, striking a spark in our souls. And that Spirit's ahas for us transport us from frustration to fulfillment, from dead-end despair to open-ended possibilities, from anxiety to excitement. Now, for most of us, our spiritual ahas don't radically change the world, but they do change us. And here's what's so great about that. A changed us can change the world. We all know that ahas don't occur every day or all the time, and there can be periods of extended drought between ahas. I find that many of us respond to the sounds of our daily routines. We have our schedules, the repetition that's involved in that kind of that murmur of the constant noise of our repetition of our lives, the schedules we keep, the activities that we keep wedging into this pre-recorded, predestined, predetermined, predictable parts of our lives. And the very nature of an aha and their serendipity and their stealth leave us with some pretty long dry spells between them. Sometimes Holy Spirit ahas direct our paths in ways we don't understand. Sometimes the gifts we are asked to share don't make any sense to us. The question for us in our faith community at St. Timothy's and for you today on this day of Pentecost, when we think about the ahas of the Holy Spirit in our lives, are you open to the surprising possibilities, the startling events, the amazing news that the Holy Spirit is bringing your way? See, that's the first step, to be open to feeling, to be open to experiencing, to be open to thinking in a new way. Have you raised your sights these last few months? Are you looking for the change that's already in the air? Or are you fixed on the rutted road of your life directly in front of you, so much that you may just miss the ahas that are all along your path? See, God has created us. He's created you. He's created me, uniquely able to hear God's voice and to hear the voice of the Holy Spirit and to respond to God's Spirit in and through us. So how do we encourage naturally the Holy Spirit's aha in us? And back on the 12th of May, I had a birthday. I turned 62. And I find that as I'm getting older, I'm interested in information that I didn't think of prior to just a few years ago. And one piece of information that I seem to always be drawn to and I'm interested in has to do with the beginning of Alzheimer's. Or as a parishioner told me several years ago, they called it sometimers syndrome. And doctors are suggesting that one way to keep the biology of our brain from beginning to form those clogged nerve paths that indicate the possible onset of Alzheimer's, the doctors say you need to try to intentionally fire off some different neurons. And they recommend some surprisingly simple exercises for our mental nerve cells. Try to take a completely different route to work or your normal activities. And don't use your GPS. Shop at an unfamiliar store where you don't know the layout of the store. Here's one. Brush your teeth. If you're left-handed, brush your teeth with your right hand. And make sure when you start doing this, you have a little extra time because it's going to be messy. And if you're right-handed, brush with your left hand. But brush your teeth with your other hand. sleep on the other side of the bed. Charlotte did this several years ago, and it totally disoriented my life. She rearranged the kitchen cupboards, so the glasses were now in a different spot than the bowls. Totally threw me off my game. But you can see how that causes you to look at things differently in a way that you see the insights of life just a little differently. So I started thinking, well, how could this work from a spiritual aha? Say grace a different way than you normally say grace at the table, and mean it. Read Leviticus instead of Luke. Pray. Pray outside. Pray standing. Pray kneeling. Pray alone. Pray in a group. Pray out loud. Sing your prayers. Whichever way you never do pray, try it differently. Intentionally look for God's presence in unlikely places, like the recycling center, or the vet, or the soccer field, or the person that's next to you at the red light on El Camino Real. Be ready for this new awareness and new insights into the things to come. And be open for the aha moments when the Spirit gains your attention. The scientist Louis Pasteur wrote, "The seeds of great discovery are floating around us, but they take root only in minds well prepared to receive them." Jesus has promised us the ahas of the Holy Spirit.